I just want us, before we get started, why you came for this session. It's very important to ask yourself, why did I register? I'm sure everybody had their own different reasons. So just think about it as you absorb, as you hear from the different speakers. So with that said, I would like to introduce our first speaker of today. I'm going to be introducing Nick, my colleague from the Jobtech Alliance.
Thank you so much, Muigai. So I thought really interesting, and I quite enjoyed the quiz. So before we kind of jump into the wider session, I just wanted to give like a couple of minutes quickly defining like what we at the Jobtech Alliance mean when we say microenterprise, because I think looking at the quiz, it's evident depending on your background that term can actually mean quite very different things. So we generally talking about Africa's smallest businesses. So these are usually fewer than just 5 people, and more often than not, it's just one. These are a market trader, a duka owner, a beauty entrepreneur, a tailor working from home, or a woman selling products socially through WhatsApp. These are typically businesses where one person is simultaneously the owner, the salesperson, accountant, procurement manager, and quite often the delivery department too. And these businesses really are everywhere. In fact, they're the dominant form of business across much of Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has 44 million of them, of which 97% are microenterprises. And roughly 2/3 of Africa's workforce earns their living or earns their livelihoods through microenterprises. And really importantly, many of these businesses are led by women. Women are just not a niche segment of the microenterprise economy. And in many sectors, they are, in fact, like the market. But these women-led microenterprises often operate with much thinner margins, less access to capital, and a lot of greater exposure to household shocks. So when the business or the microenterprise is depending entirely on one person's memory, the risk is never going to be evenly distributed. If we're going to be serious about jobs, livelihoods on the continent, we have to get a much better understanding of how these businesses actually work. And I think like over the last decade, most of the conversations have tended to focus on training, on credit, on formalization. As we kind of worked through this scan over the last kind of 6 to 8 months, became increasingly convinced that something important was actually missing from the conversation. And the hard reality is most microenterprises don't fail because the people aren't working hard enough. They're not struggling because they lack ambition. They struggle because running a business is really quite operationally difficult. Demand gets missed, payments don't reconcile, stock quite often runs out, credit isn't collected properly, customers never return. These small things really can and do go wrong every single day. So when the margins are so small and tiny, these small things compound to become real livelihood issues. And there was that observation that led us into this exploration of a few hundred job tech platforms operating all across the continent. So it started originally as like a platform mapping and a bit of a pipeline exercise, and it became something entirely quite different. Things like workflow gaps, looking at where value is leaking across microenterprises. And then some of the best platforms that we've found trying to solve some of these challenges as well. I'd like to hand the mic over to El Hadj from African Development Bank.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hadj Bah, the African Development Bank. I work in our SME division. Thank to the organizers for inviting me for this webinar. So the question I wanted to answer is why microenterprises are important for Africa's development. If you think about it, the biggest challenge for Africa's development today is job creation. Okay, we have a lot of young people. Around 60% of Africa's population is under 25. So how do we create jobs for all these young people, especially increasingly educated, coming to the labor force? Right. Microenterprises, as Nick said, he gave a number, 44 million. If you search online, you'll find somewhere 200 something million. Okay, so there is no exact number because most of them are informal. What we know is that the largest share of businesses in Africa are microenterprises, right? And if you look at the employment, you'll see around 85% of employment in Africa is employed by microenterprises, mostly self-employed. So then thinking about it, how do you create jobs and how do you raise income? So the other side of the question is how can you make the jobs more productive so you can increase income and reduce poverty, right? So that's the thing if you're looking at long-term Africa's development. Now, this productivity question is a hard one because the micro-enterprises, they are not one group, okay? It's a heterogeneous group where in one end you have self-employed people just trying to survive, right? So these are survivalist businesses. But on the other end, you have some growth-oriented businesses trying to grow and solve problems, right? Where they can become unicorns with revenues up to above 1 billion. All these start as micro-enterprises. Now, with that universe, one approach to helping these micro-enterprises is not going to make an impact. So one needs to differentiate the approach for support of micro-enterprises. Maybe the issue is not about training, is how do you reduce the risk? How do you help that business better able to fulfill its demand? How do you help that business get its supplies on time? For a growth-oriented business, that's not the issue. They may need more capacity on managerial competence, on marketing competence, and on IT and so on. So they may need more sophisticated support and how to access capital. Now, at the African Development Bank, we are a multilateral development bank. We support the government and also the private sector because we're here to help develop the continent of Africa, where the 54 countries of the continent are shareholders of the bank. Now, when we look at the challenges for the continent, as I said, job creation is a critical bottleneck for us. So we want to do everything so we can create jobs in the continent. So we support entrepreneurship, we support micro-enterprises through different angles. One of them is working with the government to put in place a good enabling environment so that businesses can get started, they can grow and be successful. They can transition from micro to small, from small to medium, and then to large, right? The second aspect, of course, you need to think about the infrastructure across the continent. So that's something we working very hard trying to solve, whether it's energy, whether it's transport, logistics, and the like. But we also want to support entrepreneurs through incubators, through venture capital funding, through skills. So we have a lot of programs that try to support entrepreneurship, that try to support young people from creating their businesses and being able to grow those businesses. And related to that is also financial inclusion. If I have a customer, how this customer can pay, how do I get to my fund? So financial inclusion for us is very important. Of course, we need to work with the big players to make sure that the infrastructure necessary for this is there, right? And other areas is about linkages, linking micro business and small businesses with larger players so that they are part of these supply chain and value chains that we can solve other problems like the food system, food security, and so on. So we try to look at it in a more holistic approach where we bring in different instruments to make sure that we support micro businesses. In the past, we have not focused too much on formalization because formalization is a double-edged sword. If you put bottlenecks for the person working in the market for them to run their business and they are not big enough to be able to operate very well in the formal economy, then you are creating more unemployment. So formalization is something, yes, you need to look at it because we can help the businesses themselves and also help the government generate more revenue. But one need to be careful on how you approach formalization. One of the key cardinal points is strategy is job creation, support to MSMEs, support to entrepreneurship, and part of that you want us to focus increasingly on formalization and support from private sector players that can bring in tools and platforms to support these businesses. It's very important. And it's a combination of all that with government, with donors, with development financial institutions like us that can come together to make sure that we create a dynamic environment in Africa where we can increase the productivity of businesses, we can increase the revenues of those businesses, but also we allow more creation of growth-oriented businesses in the continent.
Thank you, El Hadj, for giving us that continental picture of like how everything connects. It's not just the platforms, but it's a team sport. Government plays a role, development organizations play a role to tackle and to help this increase the productivity of these small businesses. So thanks a lot for that. Moving on, I would like to introduce Jonathan Donna from Caribou, who are, by the way, our partner organization for this webinar. Welcome, Jonathan Donna, who's the Chief Knowledge Officer.
Thanks, everybody. Muigai and Nick, thank you for hosting me, inviting me to be a participant in this webinar. I'm a huge fan and have been for a long time of the Jobtech Alliance and the work that it does. Its perspective on just meeting small enterprises where they are and job seekers where they are, and thinking about the whole kind of tech ecosystem has been great. And the new report is fantastic. So I will make a couple remarks just about this other paper and report that we've presented. I want to flag a caveat here, which is this is the most WhatsApp enthusiastic webinar audience I've ever been a part of. I got the quiz wrong, right? I got a lot of the quiz wrong. But one of the things that was really interesting in that quiz is the audience we have here actually overestimated the number of women relying on WhatsApp for their livelihoods right now. It's only 90 million. It's not 150 million or whatever, but it's still a massive number. But that means it's not my job to convince any of you on this call that WhatsApp is an important part of the puzzle here as we think about technology that can help small enterprises. But I'm going to argue also that WhatsApp is not job tech. It wasn't built to be job tech. It was built to be just a way to chat to your friends, and it's being used as a substitute for the job tech that everybody needs. And it's what we use while we're waiting for this community to build the right things to help small enterprises. So it's in that spirit that I'll share just a couple findings from the study, but use it only to set up this conversation about what is missing and what needs to get built and what needs to get streamlined so that we can really help as many businesses as possible, small businesses prosper. Chief Knowledge Officer, we are a consultancy. We work on digital inclusive digital economies. Last year, we had the opportunity to do this study with the support of the Gates Foundation and our partnerships with Ipsos as a survey provider, Turn.io, which did great work in chatbots as a qualitative provider, and Storytellers. We did surveys with almost 8,000 men and women in 4 countries, in Pakistan, India, Kenya, and Nigeria, and asked them a bunch of questions basically about how they use WhatsApp. We decided to talk specifically about WhatsApp instead of just mobile internet or messaging apps in general, because it is so important, precisely because of that enthusiasm that you all showed by answering the quiz question the way you did. We all know as sort of people involved in this space that WhatsApp is really important, but we didn't really know to whom or how many. And we just wanted to get that evidence out there of just how many people are using WhatsApp. So those are the numbers I'm gonna focus on today. You all know that these are the sorts of things, if you talk to the tiniest businesses about how they use WhatsApp, they'll talk about it really as an extension of their group messaging and their individual messaging behavior that they do as people. The businesses happen in the same, church groups and neighborhood groups and school groups and friend groups that they have. But they can, use status messages to advertise goods. They can sometimes discover how to use WhatsApp for business, and then they can boost and they can do all kinds of more sophisticated things because that WhatsApp for business app does a better job linking in with bigger e-commerce systems. And sometimes they can get trained. The NGOs and other groups are pretty good at sort of nudging and helping people to kind of use WhatsApp more effectively as a process to make their businesses run more smoothly. So there's a lot of intuition and wisdom already in the people using WhatsApp every day and the women using WhatsApp every day. So how does this play out? It means like WhatsApp is unique. It's got 3 billion monthly users, right? Many of which are in the global majority. And many of which are using it for small enterprise. And sometimes it's the only app, right? It can for not everybody, but in our sample, about 20% of the people who reported using any tool at all for livelihoods said they used only WhatsApp. It's like the most common first app one might use for livelihoods. And then most people use it as a tangle, because no matter what you think, you kind of never outgrow WhatsApp. Coca-Cola is happy to advertise to its customers on WhatsApp, right? Because its customers are on WhatsApp. You never leave. Once you're there, you're stuck. You got to use it as part of your infrastructure. But for some people, it's their first way in. And that's the group, that 20% is the group that's like waiting for this community to build the right thing so that they can get even better support than they have right now. Why do I think that you think that the number is bigger than it was? Why do I think that you guys said it was 150 million when it's only 90 million? And that's because there are still access barriers to using WhatsApp. The awful reminder is that not everybody's got access to a phone, right? So these all sum to 100% because they represent women in our survey who say they run a business, and whether that's a family farm or an informal business or a formal business, whether they have 0 employees or 10 employees, this is our sort of subsample. Within that, you get numbers that are like about half across the 4 countries of women say, yes, I have a business and I use WhatsApp for that business. There are some, but it's very much an exception of you have WhatsApp, but you only use it for personal reasons. It's like once you have WhatsApp, if you run a business, you're going to be talking to people and you're going to be advertising to your customers and learning from your peers and talking to suppliers on WhatsApp. Everybody does it. So your kind of addressable market for job tech is probably roughly synonymous to those who have a smartphone, right? And we're not going to get everybody if we don't keep working on the access problems. But that's okay. People are working on the access problems. When you add it up, that's how I get to, roughly 1 in 5 adults overall. 1 in 6 women and 1 in 5 adults across these 4 countries are business owners or business operators. Most of those are really, really small. And if they do, half of them use WhatsApp. That's the size of the opportunity and the market telling you that they're ready to use job tech to make their businesses run better. WhatsApp is not the best thing to do. It is fine and it's helpful and it's free and it's pretty easy to learn, but there are fraud issues and there are trust issues and there are interoperability issues. There are ways in which it's not sufficiently integrated into big ecosystems. WhatsApp for Business is the thing that Meta is offering that essentially solves some of the problems that people have with the basic consumer WhatsApp. But we can learn from this. We can learn from these pain points. We can learn from this footprint, and then we can build into that where possible. I'd say that we have a bunch of trade-offs ahead of us. One is the difference between looking to purpose-built tools to support small enterprises versus asking small enterprises to use general use tools like WhatsApp. The second is, are you building for enterprises or are you building for customers? And I think, Nick, you mentioned this earlier about like where there's that one person who runs a microenterprise who is the CEO and the customer service rep and the purchaser and the manufacturer all at the same time, right? They're also the owner and they're the family, right? And we tend, when we're talking about microenterprises, we toggle back and forth between thinking about these things as enterprises and thinking about them as people. And that's okay, but it's a tension because some of the job tech wants to be built for enterprises, but you've got to build for people at the same time. And that's what the WhatsApp data tells you. Two more. Are we building tools or are we building an infrastructure? If you build an individual tool, that's great, good, do it, but these things actually have to all work together, and WhatsApp plays in this infrastructure place. It is so ubiquitous that it acts as if it's a phone network. It's not. It's still an app. It's still somebody else's app, and Meta controls it. I put infrastructure in quotes because it's far from a public app, but it acts like infrastructure. We aspire to have an open, interoperable, transparent, dynamic, flexible, innovating, supportive ecosystem with lots of players building the right things. Beware lock-in. And then the last thing is this private-public thing, which I think I've just mentioned, but thanks very much for letting me add a few thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan, for giving us a very, almost like a 360-degree view of like why we love WhatsApp so much, but also the limitations that come with it. And I think it now follows so naturally to introduce Ritika, who works at FlowCart, who are one of our portfolio companies. For them, they really help a lot of these merchants, these micro enterprises use WhatsApp. So let's see what the missing layer is between like now using WhatsApp as we know it as a conversational platform to FlowCart now does to utilize the power of WhatsApp as it is, but also make business sense. So over to you, Ritika.
Perfect, Muigai. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this wonderful opportunity. Actually, I should extend my gratefulness to Jonathan for setting the context for my piece really, really well. Wherein he went ahead and spoke about what the broad statistics of usage of WhatsApp would look like. So we had also sort of observed this when we started off FlowCart, and we realized that WhatsApp is extremely powerful. We understand the limitations for sure. It doesn't compete with any other app. But when it comes to the adoption of WhatsApp versus any other app, there is absolutely no comparison. And that's the thesis of FlowCart in reaching scale. So, when we talk about MSMEs, we think of finance, credit, and training. These are extremely important interventions. However, I would argue that one of the greatest barriers to MSME growth is not lack of ambition or even lack of this capital or training. It is lack of identity and productivity leakage. And this is exactly what we are solving for at FlowCart. Now, think of a large FMCG like Unilever or the Darling Group, which sells hair braids and hair weaves. And I'm sure most of the people here who are joining here from Kenya would relate to the Darling Group. The big FMCGs know that they have tertiary buyers as the MSMEs as a number, not a phone number, but as a number. So, for example, they would say that, oh yes, we work with, let's say, 2,500 MSMEs. But they remain largely unknown in the supply chain with absolutely no identity in this value chain. Across our continent, millions of MSMEs are hard at work every single day. They are salon owners, kiosk operators, retailers, traders, farmers, distributors, and they're creating jobs, generating incomes, and serving their communities. But essentially, what happens is that they leave absolutely no digital footprint. No transactions, no profile, and therefore no recognized identity. And this lack of identity makes it really, really hard for these FMCG companies or the larger anchor organizations that service a larger economy to reach them and service them better. And these MSMEs essentially also struggle to access many of the opportunities that these larger businesses would take for granted. So at FlowCart, we've come to believe that before we talk about credit, we really need to talk about de-anonymization of the MSME sector, I'm sorry. And the good news is that these MSMEs are not disconnected, and Jonathan already presented the evidence of this. In fact, they're already online. They're communicating with customers, and increasingly, they're doing all of this on WhatsApp. And I reiterate the research that has been done by Caribou, which found that 1 in 6 women across Kenya, Nigeria, India, and Pakistan already use WhatsApp to support their livelihoods. This statistic is extremely important to draw attention to because it talks about MSMEs, it talks about gender inclusion, it talks about how basically a problem can be solved when we think of job creation. And this also implies that there is behavior of usage of a system or a platform that already exists. So the opportunity is not to teach these MSMEs something new. The opportunity is what they already know. And how can we essentially help them in getting more productive? So at FlowCart, rather than asking MSMEs to download another app or learn another platform or maybe another digital skill, or fundamentally change how they work, we try and meet them exactly where they are, which is inside WhatsApp. And through a simple conversation, an MSME can discover products, place orders, earn loyalty rewards, make payments, access customer support, and engage directly with the suppliers. And all of this activity that happens, it would create a digital record and a footprint, which implies a big data point, which creates trust and higher incomes and more jobs with increased probability to participate in the formal financial economy. There was an independent research conducted by 60 Decibel with the Darling Group's ecosystem, and they interviewed about 400 women stylists and salon owners. And these would be like the MSMEs in this case, alongside 26 different field agents who support and service them. The findings were remarkable. The findings essentially mentioned that nearly 90% of the stylists or these MSMEs would reported an increase in business revenue, and 97% expected their incomes to grow, and 90% reported significant time savings. On the other side of the value chain, these distributors or agents reported reaching more customers, improving inventory management, and operating more effectively. We use loyalty incentives and a very cool buy to customer feature on WhatsApp as our proprietary innovation. A merchant like the Darling Group have reported about 6x increase in their reach of MSMEs and serving them better, which implies creating holistic value. What stands out to me is not that these outcomes were not driven by sophisticated technology. These were driven by removing friction from everyday business activities. And MSMEs do not need another digital tool or another additional skill. The lesson is that when you strengthen the workflows they already use, you help them save time, sell more, enable them to participate more holistically within the economy. And that's why I find the findings of this report so powerful. I would also say that the future of MSME support is not simply about giving these MSMEs more resources. It's about de-anonymization of these MSMEs. And that is how we can create more economic inclusion at scale. And this is the sneak peek into our backend. It's a demo account, but this is essentially where the MSMEs would be housed as customers. So let me take an example. I am picking up my colleague's WhatsApp. Let's say the person here on the screen is a salon owner or an MSME and I'm an agent at Nakuru, somewhere in the middle of Nakuru, trying to say, okay, you want XYZ, how can we go about this? So keeping in mind the digital limitations or digital literacy limitations, we created this wherein an agent can pick up this click on a send card feature. And by the way, I'm on my computer, of course, but this can happen even through a cell phone. I can say, okay, this is what they want. I'm just adding a product here. I can check out. I can set up a delivery fees as well, or I can auto confirm and I can check out. So what happens is through the FlowCart's AI system, an agent rather was able to create a cart for a woman who's in the middle of nowhere, let's say in Nakuru. She will be able to confirm the order and pay for it on her own within WhatsApp via M-Pesa. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it back to you, Muigai. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ritika. I think that's a real life example of what we're talking about, job tech platforms that are enabling microenterprises. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you so much. So I think The one thing that we've seen and we've heard from is like these microenterprises rarely are running on systems. They run on the owner. They're selling on WhatsApp, they're tracking stock in notebooks, calling a riders when an order comes in, trying to reconcile everything from the day at night at home. See, the work is in the microenterprise sector, it's getting done, but it's not flowing consistently. And that led us to what's pretty much become this central idea in the entire sector scan. It's not like a binding constraint. It's not effort. It's not ambition. It's not even a lack of tools. I think there's millions of microenterprise tools that we see in the market, where the most insightful stuff is this, what we call the gap between the steps. It's a gap from customer to order, the gap from order to payment, to delivery, to restock, to cash, and ultimately to reorder as well. And I think each of these steps are happening, but the connections between them are really weak. They're manual, dependent on the owner's memory. And I think what we've seen is a lot of tools solving one piece of that chain, and very few on the continent actually connecting this full business workflow. It's a missing operational layer where the day-to-day mechanics of running these businesses lives. Why this really matters is another kind of concept we call called value leaks. And the reason this matters is like when this flow breaks, value leaks from the system. And so, it rarely disappears in this one big dramatic moment for a microenterprise owner. It leaks away through these kind of ordinary handoffs. Sending a WhatsApp message and you don't get a reply quick enough. You agree an order, but no one writes it down properly. Our product's out of stock, and so the customer goes to the next door shop as well. You give credit informally, but they never follow up and collect the credit as well. Almost every handoff in the workflow of the microenterprise owner creates an opportunity for income to disappear. Try and paint a kind of a picture here, taking a typical neighborhood shop. Might sit somewhere between $400, $500, $600, $800, but let's just use $500 as a simple example. So most of that money immediately flows back out through stock purchases, transport, rent, airtime, other operating costs. What typically remains for the owner of a microenterprise is probably around $50 to $100. And so when you're looking at those margins, like a $3 stock out leakage matters, $4 unpaid debt matters, missed repeat sales, delivery disputes. These workflow gaps are not just efficiency issues, they are like the livelihood issue. And that for businesses in the sector, like with such tiny margins, a small operational improvement using a Jobtech platform can have a disproportionately large effect on their take-home income and livelihoods as well. And so I think for us, that's why we got really excited and, why plugging these workflow leaks is actually one of the best ways Jobtech platforms can improve livelihoods on the continent as well. This is where Jobtech platforms become critically important, with historic support being focused so much on training, on credit formalization, but they're not fully solving these operational problems. Credit, for example, can leak through a badly run business really quickly. Training pretty much fades if the workflow is still manual at the end of the day. And as I had talked about earlier, like formalization can add severe burdens if the underlying business is still fragile as well. So I think what we see emerging at Jobtech Alliance is kind of a different layer of support from some of the best platforms. Simply like platforms that are helping these businesses sell more or run better, and increasingly close more of the workflow itself as well. Some of the best platforms like help microenterprises sell more, acquire more customers, capturing orders, increasing repeat sales. Others that help them like run better, managing their stock, coordinating logistics, tracking payments. But really, like for us personally, like the most interesting platforms increasingly are connecting these pieces all together. So they start to operate as one joined up process. And this is what we talk about when we say like platforms are becoming the operating system of Africa's smallest businesses as well. Take Order, for example. Order based in Nigeria and Kenya and operating in the restaurant vertical, for example. Now, small African restaurants are everywhere, but they're incredibly workflow dense businesses. You've got orders, kitchen, operations, inventory, payments. The value for Order was never going to be in just digitizing one single task. It had to be from the start of like helping this business hold the entire workflow together. And I think it's telling. Order was recently acquired by MoneyPoint, like 3 or 4 months ago. One of Africa's largest fintechs is now betting that this understanding and owning of the workflow is becoming so critically important as well. Platforms like Bumper, based in Nigeria, who we recently helped expand into Kenya. For a small merchant who's selling online, the need is not just like a digital storefront on its own. It's much more about customer management, payments, inventory, and generating repeat sales for this business. And so what we see is the more that these platforms help those pieces connect, the more embedded it can become in the microenterprise kind of day-to-day as well. And that's the pattern that we really care about at the Jobtech Alliance as well. Once these platforms are becoming part of a microenterprise workflow, you get a much clearer vision or view of the business itself. Because obviously, many of the most exciting opportunities, credit, insurance, AI, I don't think they just emerge from collecting more information per se. They're actually up from understanding how these businesses actually work. And I think that's particularly exciting as well. I think maybe some posturing from us on where we think the market's heading. Ultimately, that's what the Jobtech Alliance is trying to do, is identify and work with platforms who are looking to create, the future of jobs and livelihoods on the continent. We really do think the best platforms are going to be owning much more of the workflow, moving beyond just tools, embedded increasingly into how these businesses operate every day. We also think the future is going to be increasingly more vertical. A retailer is not a restaurant. Beauty businesses are not pharmacies. A digital creator is not just a market trader. Each of them has very different and unique workflows, different margins, different risks, and also many different points of leakage. So this generic microenterprise software, it'll have a role, but we think the strongest models are much more likely to emerge, understanding very specific operating realities of each of these sectors as well. And I think what flows off this is workflow data is actually going to become a really strong strategic asset. And I think we're seeing more and more investors and funders interested in this space as well. Being able to understand deeply and richly everyday business activity, understanding where the leaks are being plugged across the workflow as well. And lastly, I think, finance and credit will increasingly start to follow these operations. For years, the sector started with credit, but we strongly believe the much stronger sequence is in the workflow, the data. Then you start to build the trust, and then you can start layering on finance and credit as well. But it generally works best when it sits on top of a business that can actually convert all this demand into cash reliably as well. So I think if I had to maybe summarize the scan in one brief idea, it'd probably be something like the future of microenterprise digitization on the continent is not just going to be more tools. It has to be around much better flow, platforms closing the gaps between demand, between orders and payments, fulfillment and cash. Those are the ones that really are going to help Africa's smallest businesses sell more, are going to make them run better. And we hope through the platforms in our portfolio and those in the JobTech ecosystem, contribute to creating much more resilient livelihoods in the sector. So yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And that's very validating because I've been working on Tushop for 4 or 5 years. And it's nice to hear someone say that the future belongs to platforms like Tushop. My name is Cathy. I'm founder and CEO of Tushop. And what Tushop does is we provide the infrastructure for sellers, be it micro enterprises all the way to manufacturers, to sell online efficiently. And the way we do this is we provide them with a storefront that comes with order processing, payment processing, doorstep delivery, and customer support built in. So I want to introduce Linda's Nut Butter. This is a micro enterprise run by Linda. She makes gourmet nut butters that are very tasty from her house. She has 1 employee and her daughter helps her with different things when she's not busy at school. So Linda has a cult following, and people reorder. And so she was doing everything herself. She was making the nut butters at home. She was receiving orders via WhatsApp and Instagram. She was responding to those orders, processing orders via WhatsApp, and payments via M-Pesa, of course, and then coordinating delivery with different riders. And she would answer questions from customers like, where's my order? When is it going to arrive? Any customer support issues. And she was absolutely overwhelmed. When she came to us, she was done. So what we did for Linda is we created for her this storefront. We can create a storefront like this within 24 hours, and it has all her products. This storefront comes with obviously a cart. You can add to carts. You can check out. So customers are able to add to cart. They're able to check out. They're able to pay for the order. So they can choose next day delivery or 90-minute delivery. And Tushop handles the delivery for Linda. So as you can see here, I can pay for this right now if I wanted. Once I click proceed to pay, I can pay by M-Pesa. And when a customer places an order, we dispatch Linda's nut butter from our warehouse. So Linda is storing her nut butters at our warehouse, and we send it to the customer. The moment the customer places an order, they get a WhatsApp notification through our AI agent, and they're told, hey, your order has been placed, your order is in transit, your order has been delivered. And if they have any customer support issues, they can respond directly to the AI agent on WhatsApp, and we pick it up from there if the agent is not able to resolve it. Linda does not have to pay any SaaS fees to access our service. What happens is that we take a very small commission on for every order that is processed through Tushop. Doorstep delivery is paid by the customer, so that's taken care of as well. So it's free to start, right? And the next thing is that Linda now has a CRM. She can see all her customers that are placing orders. She can see her live orders as they happen, as they're being delivered. And the really cool thing is that now she has transactional data and customer data. She's actually applied for a loan from Possession because of her transactional data. And we're doing this with a few brands on Tushop. So right now, Tushop is supporting over 100 brands like this. And as I said, it ranges all the way from a micro enterprise to manufacturers. What we're doing next is helping brands like Linda get more customers. So what we've learned is that these micro enterprises, of course, want support with efficiency operations, and that's what Tushop does. But what they really want, what they want more, is custom and more orders, right? Everyone wants to grow. And so what we're doing with Linda is, structuring her CRM, making sure that she's retargeting her customers. What was very surprising to me is that she does not have a CRM of her customers for the past 7 years that she's been running a business. So she's sold probably to over 5,000, even 10,000 customers, but she doesn't have a list of those customers. And so she's always acquiring new customers, but not retargeting her old customers. So that's what we're working with her this month. The other thing that we're doing is co-running meta ads with some of these brands, just to get them more customers. And for Tushop, the next project for us is obviously running this credit pilot that we're doing with Possession. And the second thing is trying to see if we can open this up to even more informal sellers. So these are people who are selling eggs in the market, selling sausages, selling smokies. They might not want a storefront like this, but what they want is to be able to access stock credit. They can buy stock on Tushop, sell and repay the loan and get more stock, etc., etc. And then as they graduate, they can graduate to some of our online tools.
Thank you, Cathy. And I think as we come towards the sort of like the end, this is a time we've come for questions. There's a question from Jovia, and the question is, how fast can these platforms, I'm assuming Jobtech platforms in the supporting micro enterprise, how fast can they scale across different business value chains across different countries? I think we've seen a case of Bumper scaling across different geographies, but also I think the question is around different verticals and also countries.
I mean, I would kind of tend to argue the value for a lot of these platforms is really staying in the niche as long as possible, staying in the vertical, owning as much of that as you possibly can. before you start considering moving across different countries and into different kind of value chains. I think that's where we've seen some of the strongest platforms emerge.
Yes to that, Nick, but I also would like to emphasize that, platforms like at least FlowCart, because we're a pure play of a software and a SaaS, right? Our scalability is, I would say, relatively easy. So we're not operational heavy, wherein we do not, for example, we do not take stock of businesses. We don't keep inventory, none of that. We work very closely with rather businesses to increase the productivity that in turn work very closely with these MSMEs. The expansion is quite seamless. Having said that, just to reiterate, we as FlowCart, we're currently operating in about 22 different countries that cut across East Africa, West Africa. We are in South Asia and otherwise as well.
I think as an example for Tushop, right, we have a very operationally heavy side of the business, but we're also building modular tools where anyone can get a storefront. So what we're working on right now is, or just launch, is that any informal seller can get a storefront across Kenya, and they can, as long as they handle delivery themselves, if they have that ability, then they can do that. I think what's really hard to nail is actually adoption. So it could be pretty easy with SaaS to scale across the country, and we can do that even now. But we're really focused on Nairobi just to make sure that the value proposition is nailed before we can scale. But I think when it comes to tech, it's pretty easy. But the distribution is the harder thing.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
Just quickly, one thing
Yes.
that's really inspiring about this, I'm so energized by this conversation, is listening to both of the software solutions, essentially, we've been talking about in detail today, focusing on the needs of the small enterprise first, and then helping those small enterprises sell to their customers, making that connection. Yes, it's a platform in one case, sort of intention is in the right place. So I just love hearing these perspectives, and I love hearing the energy you have to solve this in a way that actually creates and sustains employment for people. That's why we're doing this. So thank you.
Always feel amiss leaving some questions out. I think there's one on Jonathan, your point about infrastructure. There's a data question. How important is it that the applications support the MSC workflow and are operated from the continent?
It's a great question, and it's too big to solve in the 3 minutes I have. But I'll say just a couple things very, very quickly. It's a really good moment to be reimagining what kind of digital ecosystem each country wants to have, right? I mean, on the AI side, everybody's worried about AI sovereignty and who owns the models and who's got this and that. But in more of this sort of elemental stuff of just even the normal nuts and bolts and pipes of making rails of making commerce work digitally, like we have to shape ecosystems that work for the small enterprises as opposed to extract the value generated between that customer and that enterprise. So the moment is right to reimagine. And it's not just Africa that's thinking in this way. I mean, there's stuff in the India stack and the Open Network for Digital Commerce and all these sort of different ways to think about making e-commerce work in an inclusive way. So yes, don't lose focus on where that value is retained, where it is created, where it is innovated. There's a ton to do.
We built a Tushop. Obviously, someone could say, "Oh, but I could do that on Shopify," right? But Shopify does not. It's not. You can't just translate it here, especially for MSMEs and SMEs. One, you have to pay a SaaS fee. Two, it doesn't have logistics built in. Three, it doesn't have storage built in. Four, it doesn't have WhatsApp built in. There's so many reasons why Shopify adoption is only for the top tier of brands, right? So we've had to build Tushop from the ground up, understanding where our brands are and meeting them there. Even the pricing that we have, as I said, it's completely free, right? So how does Tushop make money, right? We'll make money once we deliver an order, once a customer pays for delivery, once a brand pays for storage, once they start paying for marketing. And maybe we'll even make money from manufacturers and not try and make money from MSM. So there's a lot of creativity that has to go in. And then obviously credit, right? Shopify does not provide credit. So I think it's really important to actually reimagine these tools locally.
I love the fact that there's so much of localization that Cathy and Tushop has been able to do. I think it's brilliant and excellent.
There's one more question from Victor, and I think Ritika, Cathy, great one for the two of you. But FlowCart and Tushop have been around, for 5+ years each now. Like, what do you think the biggest challenge is with adoption of microenterprises of your platforms?
I think the biggest challenge of adoption is more around, digital. I wouldn't say like 100% digital literacy. And what I was showcasing, the buy for customer, is a hybrid format to solving that problem. So I still very strongly think that digital literacy sometimes is an issue. So like, for example, let's say if there's a mama boga, again, in a remote area, somewhere in Nakuru or anywhere else, she knows how to chat and send audio messages. She knows how to like view pictures. She knows how to like view and send those videos. But perhaps placing an order or making that payment on WhatsApp perhaps is challenging. Therefore, this buy for customer is a great solution. The other major barrier, I would say, is the data costs. That is something that we really, really need to talk about when we think of digital economy in our continent here. The cost of data is extremely high.
Yeah, I think when I showed Linda's nut butter, I think she is a micro enterprise, but quite a sophisticated one, right? She's registered, she has a carrier pin, but the majority of MSMEs are the ones that Ritika is talking about. I think the biggest barrier is status quo just works, right? So what reason do they have to join the digital platform? And that's what we're really working on Tushop. At Tushop, it's like, what is the incentive for them to transact on Tushop or to even share Tushop with their customers? And that's a question that I'm thinking about every day. It's like, why would a duka use Tushop, right? For what reason? And I think similar to Ritika, we have a buy for customer option where they wouldn't force their customers to place orders on Tushop. They can place the orders for their customers. There's just a barrier to entry there. But I think the other idea that I have, and which we're testing with Possesha, is can we offer stock credit to this duka? This duka buys produce from Tushop, resells, and then pays back Possesha. And so they're using Tushop as a digital platform. And that's the first step. The next step then would be, how do you get that duka's customers to pay the duka via Tushop technology? And why would they do that, right? It's because you have transactional data, and that duka can then maybe get more credits and just have efficiencies. But I think that's the next level. We have to think about what are the incentives there. You need to have really strong incentives for people to adopt your platform.
Thank you.
Great. I think we've had an amazing time learning and hearing from different perspectives.